All right. Another unbelievably beautiful autumn day. A really nice golden sunny light as I'm recording this. It's about 2 p.m. and we're just starting to get that golden light as the sun is just beginning to set in Scotland. So we probably still have another 2 hours of some kind of sunlight left, but you can definitely tell that the sun has peaked and it's starting to just barely go down a little bit. Luckily, it's been nice and warm and dry. And I think we're continuing to get some sort of rain in the evening because there's still a few puddles around. And the ground is definitely starting to retain moisture a little bit. So some of my favorite walks are starting to get just a little bit muddy, but not too bad. I have a very good chat today. I'm speaking with Matt Donnelly, who's worn a lot of hats. He is currently the Active Village lead. So he's working with Together an Active Future over in Ribble Valley in Lancashire. And he's someone who's worked as a personal trainer. He's worked with CrossFit. He's done all kinds of natural movement and generally just has a very good YouTube presence as well. If you want to check out some of the videos he's done there, he's obviously someone who puts some thought into his videos, and I think someone who sort of really believes in the power of natural movement and physical activity without ever getting too preachy about it. And first met him at one conference or another. It was outdoor physical activity. I can't remember which one now. And we just started talking, and he just struck me as a guy who really knew his stuff. And we had a really good time talking. We actually sat next to each other at lunch outside and had a good chat. And I completely failed to realize what he did. And what he does is he works with Together an Active Future. Like I said, he is the Active Village lead. And what he's been trying to do is he's been trying to identify the barriers and enablers to physical activity in rural areas in the north of England. And he's working specifically in Ribble Valley in a village called Dunslop Bridge, which I've never been to, but I'm sure is very nice. And he's done all kinds of interesting initiatives. He started a play library where he made sports equipment and other physical activity equipment available to the village, and he did fundraising for a shed that they keep all the various toys and bits of equipment in. And then he started organizing rounders games, football games, things like that. And then through Together an Active Future, he started working with Park Play to bring in a Park Play community into the area, which is an organization I think does incredible stuff. He's also worked on other interesting initiatives. He's got something that's called Farming Stronger for Longer, where he works with the local rural farming population to help keep them physically active and healthy so they can continue to farm for longer, as the name suggests. And this was just it was a really good chat. We have sort of similar backgrounds, except he's I'd say a bit more athletic than I am. But we both got into fitness when we were younger, got into gym culture, got into CrossFit, and sort of spent some time in that sphere for a while. Then we sort of realized there might be a bit more to the world than just CrossFit and barbells. So in our own ways, sort of got interested in getting outside of the gym, whether it's through natural movement or whatever sort of modality you want to call it. And have sort of been doing our own things in different ways, whereas Jill and I started Wild Strong and Nature Moves. He's had his own business, Bowland Fitness. And I think that's one of the interesting things that we chatted about today is sort of straddling the line between working in a private company and working in the public sector, which I was talking to Matt about it. And it's funny, he said he didn't even really think of it that way, but then I guess he acknowledged that he does have one foot on each side. He's a really thoughtful guy, talked a lot about training, talked a lot about building communities, power of physical activity as a way of bringing people together. He talked about just some of what he's learned in trying to work in a community setting. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed the chat, and I'd really like to get him on again in a few months to see what else he's been up to. I would definitely keep an eye on what he's doing, and I think that the work he's doing in Ribble Valley right now could be a very valuable case study for anyone else who's trying to work with rural populations and build up their own community. So he does have some good videos on YouTube that talk about this. I'll go ahead and send some links in the show notes so you can see and listen and find out what else he's doing.
How to stand on shifting sand. How to bend but stay intact.
Yeah, so I was just saying that I've tweaked my back, and you were saying that you have a history of injuries as well. So I was just wondering how you handle them.
Yeah, I put it all down to cricket, but
Yeah,
I played cricket as a kid, and my hips are um just not very good. So I've through years of you got a doctor, don't you? And
yeah.
you know knee problem, back problem, knee problem, back problem. Nothing gets answered, nothing gets sorted, And I was in uni and I got it bad, like really bad. You know when you're like 18,
Yeah.
like I shouldn't be this way. This is awful. Um, and I went and saw one of the university chiropractors, and they were like, "But it's your hips. Your hips are out of place." I was like, "All right, well that answers
Yeah.
some questions then." And then anyway, went to see osteopaths and stuff like that, and they really helped. And then I went down this applied movement neurology route. So I got my qualifications in
Oh,
that,
okay.
which was like suddenly started answering all the questions. All the questions. They were like, "Well, I don't have an injury there anymore, but body's remembering an injury." So don't get me wrong, still crops up every now and then.
Yeah.
But I know the go to stretch manipulation fixes I can do on myself, and then just get back on top of some natural movement.
Yeah. So your range of motion in your hips is pretty good. I think like as far as I can tell, you've got a nice resting squat. You've got no problems with hip flexion or anything, right?
No, yeah, everything's good.
Yeah.
I can pretty much squat to the floor.
Yeah.
I have good power out of them.
Yeah.
Strength's not the greatest. My actual weight squat is never been good.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can just literally go from actually every time I've done it has been in some form of like a flexed position where I've
Interesting.
been loading.
Yeah.
So like under a squat
Yeah. Yeah.
or usually it's a dog walk.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
dog pulls, I brace, and it's
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah. I honestly think moving more and not and kind of not pushing it,
Yep.
being a bit more intelligent about what it is I'm doing. So I know my weaknesses. So I don't lift heavy weights anymore, or heavy weights. And that kind of keeps me in good stead. One of the recent things I've started doing, because sometimes I go on a run and things are a bit like, oh,
Yep. Yep.
start tweaking. And I'll just tell myself there's nothing wrong. So I'll run along and I'll kind of just go, hip will start just having a little nag and I'm like,
Yep.
you're okay, just relax, it's
Yep.
okay. And then it kind of eases out. I don't know if there's anything there. I feel like there should be. I
I
like I want
so
to say there's something there, but
I definitely think there's something there. So with my back, it's interesting. This is the second time I've done my back pretty good. And this one was deadlifting.
yeah,
And I've never had issues with deadlifting. So I'm 40 now, about to be 41. Never had any issues with deadlifting. But took a break from heavy lifting for a few months after I tore my bicep. and
Yeah.
I just sort of got back into it, and it's that disconnect that I think
Yeah.
you really have to watch out for, especially as you get older, between what you know you used to be able to do very easily and
Oh
what
yeah.
you need to be a bit more mindful of. And it wasn't heavy. I was pulling, less than 50% of my all-time one rep max, but I just wasn't used to it. And you can sort of push your body a little bit more. If you've ever been in good shape, you can still sort of tap into that capacity,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then you have to be careful because that's the injury zone. It's a classic rhabdomyolysis story for people who used to be in good shape and then go back to metcons and things like that. But so the first time I ever did it, I was actually doing just a really light squat. I was doing kettlebell cleans into squats, and I just came down the bottom of the squat, and I just felt ping, and it
Yeah.
was like that electric ping in my lower back, and my whole body just like sort of shut down. And I did the classic thing where you start catastrophizing, you're worried about everything, but then, I started thinking about it. It's like, well, if I was working with a client, what would I say? And, you sort of know that most back pain clears up on its own. Most people get back pain. A
Yeah.
lot of times back pain is not really connected to a structural issue, but it's just going back to what you said. The issue is the catastrophizing because it happens and it hurts. It can hurt
Yeah.
so much. You think, well, that's it. I'm paralyzed for the rest of my life, or that's it. I'll never have a normal life again. But then you kind of breathe, you calm it down, and you think, you know what, it's going to be okay. The body is very good at healing itself. Even if I do have some sort of, disc bulge or something like that, I can still live a perfectly happy life. So it's funny because I thought I'd gotten over all the mental stuff, and now it happened again, and you're thinking, "Ah, gosh, that's it. I'm never going to move again." But obviously, over the next few days, you breathe, and it's just like you said, it's just the
Yeah.
movement. It's just giving yourself that little bit of movement, listen to your body, opening up, going back to the natural movement. But then I guess the last thing you said, which I think I'm on board with now, I realized I've used heavy lifting or relatively heavy lifting as such a crutch for movement for a long time because it's how I started. And
Yes.
even though I would never have clients do it anymore, I still am stuck in that sort of powerlifting CrossFit modality where, I still do my heavy deadlifts. I still do my heavy squats. Sometimes I'll get really grindy on them. And I don't think they do anything for me because I can't say my quality of life was any better with a 200 kg deadlift
Yeah.
uh, than
No.
anything else. And I don't even know if the transfer is there because it's such a specialized bit of equipment. I don't even know if it made me better helping my friends move or anything. It was just like very, very specialized training. So
Yeah.
I need to, it's one of the things I need to think about is that actually I think I might start phasing out a lot of the heavier high intensity lifting, still working moderate weights and still working my squats and deadlifts, but just not chasing numbers anymore. Cause I do it for the wrong reasons. I do it as a form of vanity because, my squats and deadlifts can get pretty high. And it feels nice to know that if I were in a situation where I was in a gym or something like that, I could squat as much as most people in the gym. But it's a form of vanity and it doesn't improve.
No, and do you
Uh,
know what? Sometimes there's nothing wrong with it. A few years ago, I remember, and it was all right 'cause it wasn't heavy lifting, but I was like, I'm just gonna start doing press ups
yep.
again because I was really good at press ups,
Yeah.
and there was no other reason for me to start doing press ups
Yep.
than the fact I wanted to feel good at something.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I started doing
Which,
it. I just wanted to feel good.
yeah, like you said, it's fine because I think like obviously you do a lot of growth when you spend time doing things you're not good at. But there are loads of things I'm not good at, and it is sometimes just nice to get back in that comfort zone of thinking, yeah, you know what, I am pretty good at this, and it's good to feel good at it. Anyway, I guess so I guess let's do brief. I should probably introduce you who we're talking to. So Jill will do a bigger intro in the post editing, but who are you? And I know you wear a few hats, so how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, I'm Matt. I have a company, Boland Fitness. So I suppose the crux of it, I'm a fitness coach.
Yep.
And I've taken on many different titles over the last kind of 15-ish maybe years. Um, but I think simplified, yeah, that's what I do. That's my speciality. I do fitness, personal training classes, um, and yeah, it's the aim is to make people fitter and healthier, and I suppose give people freedom.
Yep.
That's my main little push. I want people to feel free to do stuff, and whatever the barriers are that stop that happening, kind of try and find ways to overcome those. So yeah, that's in a nut kind of
Yeah.
what I am.
It's funny. That's one of the taglines we use as well at Wild Strong is just to, yeah, maximize people's freedom, allow them to sort of make the choices to do the activities they value. But
Yeah,
some of that comes in the capability approach that we use. But that's sort of what it all comes down to for me as well. Is, yeah, just giving people freedom so they can do what they want to do and maximize those freedoms. So yeah, you said you're a fitness coach, a PT trainer, and I know you've sort of gone through lots of different training, and I know you've sort of worked in different contexts. So what are some of the contexts you've worked in, or what's some of the, I guess, the training that you've done that's been meaningful, that sort of changed or caused you to zig and zag in your career?
so I suppose I've always liked fitness.
Hmm.
So I've always liked the fitness element of everything. So playing sport, I had to rely on fitness because admittedly I wasn't super talented at any
Yeah.
sport. So I got through and pushed myself by the fact that I was always one of the fitter people there, and I kind of went with that. So I initially started the gym because I just wanted that feeling. And, I love that feeling of confidence he started to give me. So initially it was just a normal kind of standard gym machines,
Yep.
a few free weights, your cardio stuff. Just really liked feeling that feeling of being fit and doing something all the time and pushing it.
Hmm.
Um, and that carried on through. And then I was doing some pretty weird fitness stuff as well. So I was I got into the whole move nut thing early on. Not that I
Sure.
was like went down a coaching route in it. I just enjoyed getting out, running, jumping, rolling, doing that kind of stuff. And I think a mate of mine just kept seeing this random stuff I was doing. He was like, "Why don't you come and join CrossFit?" And I was like,
Yeah.
"No, I'm fine. That's like 30-minute drive away. I'm not doing that." This carried on for a bit. Um,
So, so you got into MovNut before CrossFit?
yes,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
it was.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I was. It was one of those lucky situations where I was getting into fitness.
Yeah.
Well, not into fitness. So I was getting into becoming a fitness trainer,
Sure.
and it was just around the time that MoveNat was like getting a little bit of scope. I know it had been around for a bit before then, but it was just there, and it was like so. It was this period when MoveNat and Paleo was coming
Yeah.
through.
So trying to orient. So like for me, I think I really got into paleo stuff around, I want to say 2009. I can't remember when the first big MovNat video came out. Was it like 2010,
It's an
2011?
yeah,
Somewhere around there. Yeah. And yeah, I remember, I think maybe Rob Wolf was talking about it in his podcast, and it must have been about
yeah,
2010. And yeah, CrossFit was already sort of well established by then for about 10 years or so.
yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
MoveNat comes out. The only reason I'm saying this is because for me it was a flip flop order, and I always think of MoveNat as something that came out as a response to CrossFit. You, you know, so it's interesting that you did it in the other order. So okay, so you're doing MoveNat already, and then your buddy convinces you to come out to CrossFit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I took it. I ended up writing a blog. I used to write these blogs for the company I worked for as a personal trainer.
Hmm.
And there was this offer I was to write a blog to promote CrossFit. And with it, I got this free CrossFit taster session, pair of Reebok trainers.
No, cool.
And so I was like, well, yeah, I could do with a new pair of trainers. I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I went along and did this taster session in Manchester, it's like South Manchester somewhere.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh wow, I like this. This is more my kind of thing. And I always remember it because it was a version of Fran that we did.
Oh yeah.
It
Okay.
was thrusters and pull ups, and I was like, when you're like, oh, these thrusters don't feel too bad.
Yeah.
We were not doing them at the Fran weight though. It turns out, and then pull ups, I was like, oh yeah, I enjoy doing these pull ups where I get to throw myself around the bar a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I went on holiday, came back, signed up for my mate's gym, and he was yeah, and then it was one of those, you know what he's like. He's just it took over then, and it's
Yep.
like I think 6 years I was, or six plus years I was doing it. So that took a big part of my training life, and yeah, do you know what? I enjoyed it as well. It
Yep.
was, yeah, I can't say I didn't. Eventually, when I stopped and came out of it, I was happy to be
Yes.
leaving the situation. But I think that's not less down to CrossFit itself and more down to other things. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I know we've talked about before, but I was a active CrossFit coach for I think about 10 years. I want to say, oh, I don't know. I want to say probably about 2011, maybe 2010 to about 2020 or so, give or take.
yeah,
And same with me. Like, I enjoyed it, and I loved, I love being a coach. I love being a part of it. I love some of the community that engendered and everything. But then when it was time for me to leave, it was also time for me to leave. And same thing, you know, it was sort of it was more where I was in my life rather than a reflection of CrossFit. Well, I say that, but then I wonder if it's true. I start to see some limitations and contradictions
yeah,
in CrossFit, which is not a knock against CrossFit because CrossFit is CrossFit. It is what it is. But when you look at everything through a CrossFit lens, certain things aren't really thought of. Certain things aren't really taken care of, and it's very easy to think that your life begins and ends, with the buzzer and the wad, and then you realize that there's actually loads more ways to be healthy
yeah.
and fit, etc.
Yeah. I think that was, I suppose I was coming out of CrossFit for quite a few years.
Hmm.
But I just managed to stick around. I enjoyed being around it, and I think I constantly hoped it would fulfill what I initially thought it was. It was
Mm,
this really open thing that almost anything goes in
yep.
CrossFit. You know, it's quite open. You can do this, you can do that, and then all I saw was it getting more and more closed and boxed into kind of
Yes.
a very fine line thing.
Y- Yeah.
And
So I guess it's worth talking about this because I experienced the same thing. I got in trouble a few times when I was working as the head coach, and people would come into the box sometimes and say, "What are you doing? This isn't CrossFit." And I always think back to one of the early, I can't remember which article, but one of the early Glassman articles where he, talks about how CrossFit should be like a stepping stone so you can do all the other activities you want to
yeah,
do. And then I think we lost a lot when people started focusing on the games and the celebrities and um, I use the word sportification a lot, which is where sometimes if you take an activity, you turn it into a sport, it can create perverse incentives
yeah,
and cause people to over specialize, etc. And I think a lot of that happened with CrossFit. People became so obsessed with what, you would do a movement sometimes, and people would say, "Well, that's not a CrossFit movement." And you'd be like, "Well, I know it's not codified. I know it won't show up in the games, but I think it's worth doing, learning how to do in a sort of high stress, high intensity environment, etc." Um, and then I realized that there were sort of expectations, and I remember it was when I went to go get my level 2 because my L1 was expiring that I started to have a lot of issues with the way that coaching progressions were handled. I remember I wrote a letter to Castro after the L2, and I just kind of said how disappointed I was, and not necessarily because anybody, again, not because anyone did anything bad or because the trainers and the course weren't good. It was just very narrow. I remember there were some people who had issues squatting to parallel, and they said, "Well, you just got to take weights off them, give them a PVC, a PVC pipe, and they'll be fine." So I was saying, "Well, what if we gave them, a kettlebell as a goblet squat and use it as a counterweight?" And the coaches started making fun of me. They said, "If they can't squat low, why would you give them more weight? That's not going to fix it. Just take the weight away." And I got in this argument about how, well, sometimes limitation isn't the load. Sometimes there could be other things. And we started talking about
yeah,
ankle mobility, and they just had no time for it. And I said, "Man, I just can't. It's just too myopic the way that progressions, regressions, and things were handled. And I understand why they do that in a product, but at the same time, you never want to be in a position where you go get a new certification, just sort of, bite your tongue. Don't say if you disagree, than promptly go around and ignore everything they said and then do things your own way. It's not a enviable position to be in because then it makes you feel like a hypocrite.
Yeah, no, true. It is, isn't it? It feels like you're. I mean, I felt sometimes you're just paying the money just to get the next qualification to
Yeah, the
stay
hamster
within the
wheel.
game. I mean, yeah, yeah, it was. I mean, for me, it was the moment where I started searching back into the MoveNat thing because again that had got bigger again.
Yeah.
I posted in my own personal post about the fact that, you know, remembering that you do CrossFit only to be able to do more stuff, and remember it's about
Hmm.
getting outside. And I felt great to be able to get back out and do some of this moving up stuff, you know, and how great the stuff in CrossFit had helped me
Hmm.
go outside and how I felt really fit. And I just remember the head coach, the owner of the gym, just pulling me aside and having
Mm.
almost like, you've got to take that post down of Facebook. And I was like, but why? He's like, well, you kind of turning people away from what we do. And I was like, I was, do you know, when I was
Yeah.
like looking back, I not that I agree with him because I completely disagree with him
Yeah.
still. I was so confused at the time. I was just like,
Yeah.
well, what have I done? What we've done? Surely we're making people fitter and healthier to go out into the real world and be fitter and healthier. Why has it got to stay in the box? It's almost like,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, I think you're right with the kind of sportification of it. It's like you make it into a sport, and suddenly everyone only saw the sport
Yeah.
rather than the fact that,
And yeah,
yeah,
I got in similar troubles with actually both my owners. So I worked at two different CrossFits over the
yeah,
course of well, maybe I guess two and a half over the course of my career. And both times I got in trouble for doing things outside. So there was a parkour place that had opened up when I was working in Bangkok, and I tried to get some of the coaches out there to do it, and some of the members, because I didn't think the two were mutually exclusive, but I got in
yeah,
trouble for that. And then yeah, also sort of organizing like casual obstacle runs and things. And so, both times I sort of was pulled aside and, like, what are you doing? And I was naive because it also wasn't my money on the line. I didn't have any skin in the game in terms of I didn't really have an investment in either of
yeah,
the gyms. So, I understand CrossFits don't make loads of money, and anything that could be perceived as taking money away, I understand where they're coming from, but then I also, it just put me in a situation where it's like, well, I don't entirely believe what we're doing. And I guess we can shift over another thing, but it's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot over the last few years. It's like, if you come at something with a model and you start to see contradictions and you realize that there are exceptions in the way you look at the world,
yeah,
you sort of have to reshift your model or zoom out a little bit until you can come up with a new model where you
yeah.
don't feel like you're trying to hold up all these contradictions that obviously don't make sense. So, all right, so you had the chat, and you started to kind of fall out of love with the limitations of CrossFit. So what came next?
What came next? So yeah, I mean, it was a few years later. I bounced backwards and forwards between different things, working within the realms of CrossFit, but doing other things within. Like, don't get me wrong, there's one gym that kind of kept going back to, so it's the one closest to me, which is Clitheroe, and they
Hmm.
were really open about, doing different things. So I was allowed to kind of do these little weird special classes that I do, throw on different things, do a bit of, I started throwing in, like, I went down very much down this, I think at the time I was calling it intelligent movement or movement intelligence.
Hmm.
And it was this very much kind of looking at different movement ways of moving. So, read down the Qigong route, which I still use a lot now, the
Yep.
yoga stuff. Did a lot of, really got into kind of, the parkour kind of stuff, really wanted to look down that route. Some very low level tricking, just breakdancing, just anything that was just different and new. I suppose you'd say it was within that realms of the whole Edo Portal type.
Yeah, I guess what people would call movement culture now.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, it was all sort of coalescing, and it was this really exciting part, or exciting point in the history of the internet and movement, where all these cool things were coming together. Yeah, and you're right. Ido Portal was he was kind of at the top of it, I suppose. But there are other people who are synthesizing it. But you're right. It's sort of, a lot of that has kind of it's fallen under the umbrella of if you do that, people say, "Oh, that's Ido Portal stuff."
Yeah, yes, yeah. I mean, he's the famous person from the whole Conor McGregor era, wasn't it? It was that
Yeah, yeah, that sort of peak.
real buzz around it. Yeah, so that I mean, and all these things that I've done have kind of. It's not like I've moved away from them. They've kind of they're all coming with me. So I've still, I'll still use a 21-15-9 workout,
Yep,
just
me too.
randomly it's in there, but it might not be thrusters, pull ups, and something. It'll be like, there might be an element of some freestyle movement in there. So these things have kind of come along with me, and building up, and then I suppose COVID hit, didn't it? And
Yeah,
it was almost like this lovely little kind of nudge at me to go. Well, more than that, like, what are you doing?
yep,
Why are you still in a gym? Like, what's happening here? Like, why are you still working for people?
yep.
And I was like, right. So I took things outside because we had to, and I started like exploring more of this kind of these edges
Mhm.
of what we're doing. So still doing like very much like kettlebell things, but then I'll be setting up my slack lines. I'd have clients on the slack line, and then we'll be like, right, how many ways can we move around this slack line? Right, can we use this tree? Can we climb this tree? Can we jump over this log? Just random stuff that would be trying out, and I'd be like, oh, I'm back doing more of the kind of stuff I enjoy. And I suppose that's kind of fast forwarded now where I've got a merge of it. So I've got classes indoors, but also do outdoor sessions.
Mhm.
It's this nice, for me, merge of a few different things, and looking at this idea that I suppose in theory there's a bit of a model, but it's very loose, and I can kind of drift off it when I want to. But almost people need to move naturally, and kind of similar to your kind of stuff, the whole play aspect of it, and play being quite a big subject because it's not just kind of kids on a bike, is it?
Yep.
But it's that kind of idea that some people might need to do a bit of something before they get there to where before they suddenly can start doing that freedom movement. So
Yeah, that's it. And I guess you said a lot of good things there. And you're sort of dancing around the same thing that I've been dancing around. Is it's hard to encapsulate everything into a model, and it's almost like the moment you try to turn something into a model or turn it into a system, things fall through the cracks. It's one of the things that when we run our courses, it's really hard because people like to have the recipes. They like to have the acronym. It's like you teach them the ABC step to do this, and it's quite hard. And obviously as you pull in more and more things, you try to make sense of it. And I know for me, a lot of things started clicking when I started learning more about ecological dynamics and constraints-led approach
yeah,
and
yeah,
things like that. Because all of a sudden, I had space for the play. I had space for asking questions and exploring. I like what you said. What you're giving people slack lines and trees and say, well, what can we do with this? Sort of what affordances does the tree provide? What movements are elicited from, being outside in the woods versus being in a field, etc. But it's a tricky balance for me, I find, because sometimes it's too easy for me to get very like loose and woolly, and
yeah.
try to pull it back into something that's meaningful for people without giving them an entire lecture is quite hard. So I was just wondering, yeah, where do you kind of stand on all that? Like how do you try to make sense of it all?
Do you know what and I suppose this is where I suppose this is where I've started to learn a bit more. It comes through the moments, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Because sometimes you can clock that somebody just needs a bit of freedom, and it's like they don't need any instruction. We
Yep.
just need to provide the space with some people, chat. And that's what they want. And then
Hmm.
other times people need a workout, and people
Yes.
want sets and reps and structure, and they want to feel like they've worked hard, and sometimes they need that. And it's kind of, you know, obviously if you're running it as business, there's classes, so kind of, specific classes that do specific things, but it's kind of that, yeah, I don't know, providing enough of something.
Yep.
Because I know what you mean with the I'm in this, trained headspace that as the old coach that I was like, it's got to be done this way. And it's got to be this perfect movement. It's got to be look
Yes.
like this, and it's got to happen like this. And I was
Yes.
really strict, and I was the coach that clients didn't want me to spot them because I'd come and pull them up and make them. And I was like, I'm making them better though. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not like we're gonna get you to perform amazingly well, so you've got the best out of what you can do. And then suddenly like, oh, maybe I should just sit back though and just show them a movement and see how they do, and then step in once or
Yeah.
give them an object,
It's
and
it
I started to step in. It's such difficult things to
it's
go
it's
from a
it's
court
so
to
difficult, isn't it? And then you also think about what people expect. I think of in the
yeah,
past when I've sort of been a much more hands-on, coach, where I have the set way. This is what I want the movement to look like. These are the points of performance. These are the common flaws. These are the cues I'll use to correct it. Here are the progressions, regressions, et cetera. I'll do. And people, a lot of times if people like that, people
yeah,
like it when the coach has all this, and there is a time and place for it. Um, but then you realize that when you're trying to focus on natural movement and problem solving and things like that, you have to let people self-organize sometimes. But
yeah,
it's exactly like you said, people sort of need the foundations before they can really express, the freedom and the improvisation because, sometimes people feel like they need a little bit more. And I always think of the concept of face validity, which is that, people's expectations are so important. People have expectation that an exercise class or a fitness class or whatever they think they're coming into
yeah,
is going to be a certain way. And then, you as a coach, you're trying to elicit um, movement solutions from people. It's funny because, sometimes that's not what people want. Yeah, it's one of those things that you're right. It's just about the experience. Like over time, you sort of learn what people need. And we've do the same thing where we offer different classes because we've sort of found um, that is probably the best chance of giving people what they need, sort of giving them the play and exploration classes, giving them the more classic 21-15-9 sets and reps strength and conditioning classes. And it seems to be a good balance, but it's one of those things. Yeah, you're constantly shifting and tweaking it, aren't you?
yeah. There's that. You think you're onto something, don't you? You're like, I've nailed it. I've got this model, like,
Yeah.
and I'm constantly doing it. Oh, I need something to sell. I need this program to sell. I need this.
Yep.
I need it to be perfect so that people can become this really like, that this is how I get you fixed and you start moving better and you're healthier and you're happier. And it's like, and then sometimes that model's just, it's got to be this like really background thing that
Yes.
it's quite open that you can just weave into and weave out and like take bits. And I think that's where like it does come with experience that
Yes.
like you'll suddenly go, there's that move that I used
Yep.
like 10 years ago with this one person. I think that's going to work with you. Or yeah, maybe you're doing something like, do you know what? Let's release it a bit, relax. And I'm just going to, let's just have a bit of freestyle. Let's just see where
Yep.
it goes and see if that's working. Because it's sometimes kind of, I suppose, checking yourself and checking other people as well to make sure it's
Yeah.
going on that right line. I mean, it is challenging. I suppose for me, it's I look at it that you've got this as kids. You just start moving, don't you? You pick
Hmm.
up movements off other people. You watch other people. You watch and you start moving. You go through these like set movements that you go through, like crawling, walking. You learn all these brilliant things, but nobody's telling you where to play stuff. You're just learning them, aren't you?
Yep.
And then over time, like we Western world type living, we get a bit rubbish at stuff,
Hmm.
and it's getting that fine line between let's retrain your body to be able to move in a way that you're meant to be able to move, and then let's start doing this. It's kind of just gradually feeding in
Yep.
these little bits. But then you got to look at everyone's got different goals as well, and it comes down to that. So there's so many bits that it comes down to, isn't it? And so you got to be adaptable, I
Yeah.
suppose.
I guess that's a good segue talking about people's different needs. So you, like we said, you wear different hats. So obviously you've got bowling fitness,
Yeah,
but now also in the last few years, you sort of shifted into sort of community public work. I guess we could call it, working with active villages. Can you sort of explain your role there and how that all came about?
Yeah, so it comes back from again me as a bit of a move in terms of post COVID. We were planning on moving down to Devon
That's
to
right.
open a CrossFit gym. That had all been planned, sorted. I'd just done my level 3 like the day before we all went into lockdown. I was like, right, this is it. We were all going for it. Everything was set in place. And that happened. And it's like, and then, year went by. I was like, oh, what are we doing? So we moved to a village close by, but like much, much more rural.
Hmm.
Um, Started setting up the fitness stuff there. And it just so happened that with this uh, bit of a project, this Sport England kind of funded work, and one of the work streams was rural village, and basically finding out what's different with activity in rural villages than it is to like urban situations.
Yep.
Um, so as I moved in, I was just put onto that, and I was like, "Oh, follow this up, and I'll look into it." Uh, and it's just turned out to be this really like amazing piece of work that's helped me change my mind in terms of a lot of things,
Hmm.
thought wise, but for like fitness and activity, and that sense of freedom. Um, but basically, it was this idea to set up or to look at an active village, and so we started off by getting some research done, chatting to people. A lot of it was just chatting to people, one-to-one conversations, finding out what their feelings were, uh, putting that alongside some statistics and things. And 2.5 years, nearly 3 years, I think, on, and we're kind of going down the route of setting up this kind of active village network within our area, which is the Ribble Valley,
Hmm.
and to just try and get more villages active, because there is certain barriers that kind of prevent that wouldn't be the same in an urban area.
Yeah, let's talk about that because you gave your talk the other day at the Curiosity Conference,
Yeah.
and I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was great the way you presented it with the role playing and really got people thinking about sort of the challenges and some of the opportunities for I guess for villages in general in terms of promoting physical activity. Obviously, you have different resources than people might have in urban areas. So, I mean, can you just sort of generally talk about some of the barriers that you found, some of the things that were sort of preventing people from engaging in physical activity?
So I mean, some of the main barriers are like you've got your obvious ones is the what I'd say geographical isolation. So you're distanced from any normal kind of what we deem as normal active places like your leisure centres, swimming pools,
Yep.
um, you know, uh, sports fields as such. So big infrastructure
Yep.
that helps create that obvious place to go and be active. Um, there's that with the so there's that, and so there's the travel, the time, and the petrol costs all there. So really, you don't want to be having to travel to go and be active.
Nope.
And then so your only other go to is and it's a pretty good go to is being active in the natural world, but people don't necessarily beyond walking, people
Yep.
don't know what that is because everything other than walking out in nature is deemed as being weird and
Yes.
not a done thing, which is quite crazy in itself to think that we're so far be out like was that so far gone that yeah, if you were to get down on all fours and crawl, which I did do the other week,
Yeah.
um, is kind of a weird, crazy thing to
It's
do.
it's
Um,
really hard to do by yourself if you're the only person doing it.
yeah,
Yeah, it is really tough. And I talk to people all the time who do, natural movement certifications of, from whatever organizer. And, they leave feeling really empowered and ready to do it. But then when it's when it's just them being the one weird guy in the park who's crawling or climbing trees or whatever, they find that, yeah, it is. It's really hard. I think you hit the nail on the head. When we
yeah,
talk about being active outdoors, especially if you don't have any kit, it's pretty much walking.
yeah.
Um, and then anything outside that quickly can become uncomfortable or embarrassing, or not even that, just feel self-conscious.
yeah. And yeah, so kind of yeah, it's that, and that people, and I think what I found is that I wanted to promote that, and it was like, well, the expectation to do that is quite, people for all the best, they're not going to fully get into that because it's just so challenging
Yes.
to overcome that. So it was like, right, well, what can we do to get this going? What's the main thing? And I was like thinking, well, the main thing, there's no equipment and there's no shot. So I always started thinking when I was a kid and we wanted to play football, we'd nip down to town, get a football,
Yep.
go and play. So whatever we wanted, if we didn't have that piece of equipment in the house, we could just nip and get it. And I was like, well, that's not possible here because the day's gone if you were to nip into town
Yep.
because you're talking an hour round trip to go and do that. And so we kind of initially got a crowdfunding together to get some equipment on the playing fields. So it's just an open kind of shed that people can
Mm-hmm.
go and access and then play. So it's kind of football stuff, cricket stuff, rounders stuff, and all this, which in itself is just a lot of equipment and brilliant. People can go and access it, but it just afforded the opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
then go, right, we're going to do a rounders meetup on a Thursday. So suddenly it's like, right, there's this community aspect now where we're being active and social at the same time,
Yep.
which in my head is what I think the correct definition of play should be, is just socially active,
Yes.
or active and social. And suddenly you got these things that started building these little aspects that we could actually meet up on a Thursday and do this. We could meet up at any point and kids could go down and families could go down, and we kind of did a few like events off the back of that as well to kind of show that you can use this. And yeah, it creates this community. And alongside the classes that we were doing on the field as well, it's kind of seeing that people are being more active, and the more you see people being active, it starts to break down those barriers of you being active as
Yes.
well, because you can just come and join in. I thought for myself, Rounders was this brilliant game because it's not, even though it's a sport, and I don't want to insult anybody by saying it's not a sport, it's definitely a sport and it's hard.
Yes.
It's accessible to
Yeah.
most people because they can kind of go, that's that game we used to play at school.
Yes.
And for some reason, you don't need to be able to catch because nobody cares if you
Yep.
drop it. I don't know why it works that way, but nobody seems to. Uh, you don't need to be able to throw it as such. You don't even need to be able to hit the ball. You're just going down, standing around, moving around, chatting, having a right good laugh. And it was just, yeah, it was like these moments I was just like, well, this is what it's about, really.
Mm-hmm.
That it's this, and a group of this multi demographic. Like there was men, women, different ages, kids were coming down and joining in, and it didn't matter how fit you were. So it's not like going to a gym where it's almost like you feel like you need to look a certain way to join in.
Yep.
There was none of that. It just really opened up this new kind of side to it. So yeah, that was like a big overcoming of the barrier of there. And don't get me wrong, it's not finished yet. These things take years to kind of
Yeah.
click
So,
in place.
so you currently you have one. Sorry, should I call it a movement library? What do you
Yeah,
call it?
play library.
The
We
play library. Yeah.
yeah,
So you've got one play library set up so far. Is that right?
yes, yeah,
And you did
yes.
it. And you did it through crowdfunding. So how did you sort of spread the word?
So it was quite a good period. The Lancs County Council had got this kind of match funding,
Mm-hmm.
and different levels for different organisations. But um, if you manage to get to a certain point, they would then match that, and you get the money.
Gotcha.
So we went down that route. I went to all the learnings of how to do it, and little meetings and playing around with different ideas of what we crowdfund for. Kind of my initial crowdfunding was not the play library. I had this massive, outlandish idea that was so much fun. But what I realised is that I was just satisfying my own needs to do this big, massive project. And I was like, no, just
Can you just talk about what it would have been? Because I'm
the
pretty interested to hear.
yeah, this big project was going to be that. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was based on. It was very much based on bringing play to being a natural thing. But oh god, it was like, the school was going to be involved, and there's going to be arts. It would have been amazing, and there's going to be events, but it was this big, almost a 50-year plan of
That's
action.
cool.
I mean, it was one of those. It would have been great, but it's then kind of going,
Man,
right,
I'll tell you what though. I've thought about it before. If you were able to establish like a few sustainable movement communities, play communities in a few villages,
yeah,
and if you could get it to be not just multi-generational in terms of everyone playing at the same time, but if you could get it to be generational. So, like people who grew up now, if somehow their own children could pick up on it, you could just
yeah,
think of sort of the founder effect, the benefits where all of a sudden someone's coming through, some part of the north, and they walk up. It's like, why is this cluster of villages? Why have so many, I don't know, Olympians or professional sport athletes, or why are the physical activity rates so high? And they think, oh well, because 60 years ago,
yeah. I mean,
this happened, and it's just stuck, and now it's made like a sustainable culture in that area.
yeah. I mean, that's the dream, though, isn't it? And I think I looked at it and thought, right, that's the dream, but that's not what I'm funding for. What's going to kickstart it? What's my first step in the door?
Yep.
And then that was where the play library came in. And do you know what I often think as, like, I want it to be that, like in like 50, 60 years time, it's not this thing of like, why is that player library here? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
It's just a thing. It's just there. Like, it's there as much as the cafe is there, and it's there
Yep.
as much as why is there a river here? Who knows? I don't know. It's just here. Let's just use it. And it's almost, people don't question it being there. It's just a normal thing that you
Yeah.
go open up the shed and just get on and
It,
play. And
it's a powerful idea. I mean, the idea of libraries in general, I think, are so
mm,
important.
oh
This
yeah,
idea of, again, it's one of these places where you don't need money in order to interact with it. This whole idea of place first venue. These things where you can just be and meet people, and there's no expectation of economic transaction. As they don't you don't hear this conversation so much anymore. But I remember on the internet probably about 5 or 6 years ago, there was an economist who wrote an article saying how we don't need libraries anymore because we have Starbucks and Amazon.com. And I thought, gosh, that just really misses the whole point of what happens in a library in terms of community resilience and exchange. And like you said, meeting people from different backgrounds, not self-sorting,
yeah,
just having this as like a common good, a common asset. And the idea of a play library, or a tool library, or some of the
yeah.
other libraries that are showing up. I mean, I think there's such powerful tools, and I hope we can establish them, because I think it's one of those things that I can point to is like, this is a good thing that's happening in society right now. And I
Yeah.
think, couching it as a library, I don't know. I just think it's really beautiful. And just the idea that the people in this community just have access to it, I think is really powerful. I think it's something that you should feel really proud of.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of those things that it was. Yeah, it's kind of, it feels like, I don't know. I don't really ever look at things of in terms of something I've done or proud of. But it is one of those things that, like, if this could go through and be a set thing, this is in all the villages. Then how amazing this. And don't get me wrong, it's not that easy. We are very lucky that we've
Hmm.
got, like, you know zero to very little crime rate.
Yes. Yep.
Where we are, we've lost, maybe in 2 years, we've lost, I think, 6 balls, and a few have been popped. And I think most of those can be put down to the fact that they've just gone in the river
Yep.
and disappeared. So it's like, we are lucky, and we have looked at the fact that if it went into some of the other villages, there would have to be a lock system,
Yeah.
and people would have to, so there'd have to be some systems. And there is actually some stuff out there that I've kind of found that can work for that. We had a lock on ice for about 2 weeks, and then it went missing, and I just never did it. I was like, well, what's the point? What's the point in replacing it? Because nothing goes. I thought I'll just leave it open for a
Yeah.
bit and then see what happens. And And it was like, well, it seems to be all right. So isn't it nice that like the confidence in humanity that we can just do that, and how lovely that is. It's
Yeah, and it's chicken and egg as well, because I think it's one of those things. There are a lot of communities that couldn't support it, but then you also think like if you could start it, that could be like the seed of
yeah,
creating little pockets where there is enough trust. Because if people feel like it belongs to them, and I think if there's enough community cohesion, I mean, just an example I'm thinking of, um, one of our sites up in Scotland, someone vandalized the shed where people keep their equipment. Nothing bad. They just sort of smashed it up. It was kids. Nothing was
yeah,
really stolen. But the community came together, and you know, the coach over there, the founding coach, she went in like a 6 hour period from thinking that, well, how am I going to come back from this? This is really going to affect how I run my classes. The people in the community came together. They knew someone who was a welder, and they knew some people who had bits and bobs from IKEA and everything. And by the end of the day, she had a bigger metal shed put together that the community, because it was so important for them
yeah,
that it happened. And then on top of that, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure they, through the grapevine of the small village, they knew who the kids were that did it. And I guarantee you that those kids, they got an earful from their parents, and they probably won't do it again. It's just the way that sort of a healthy kind of community can regulate these things. And I don't know, but I don't think she's going to have any more issues like that in the future. Um, but yeah, you're right. It's easier when things are small and everybody knows each other, and it kind of works on the village level, and
yeah.
not all places can do that. So you've got the play library. What else are you working on, or what are some of your future goals in
So
terms of active villages?
yeah, so I mean, the play library kind of afforded a lot of other things, or allowed a lot of other things to kickstart, and it got to a point where I think the key thing about the whole active villages is that we're not focusing on demographics. We went down, with a lot of things, and it's always been a little bugbear of mine, and I get why it's done. It's like, right, we're looking at this kind of demographic, and we're going to like really try and fund and raise money for this demographic, and this is our main focus. And I was just like, no, we've got to look at the whole picture, because if we're looking at elderly, then it's not, you can't just focus on making the elderly more active, because
Hmm.
what's sustainable is, if you want older people to be active in 60 years, then you need to get them when they're 10 years old.
Yep.
That's how to make it sustainable. So it's like, right, let's get this whole binding approach going where we focus on everybody. So it's almost like it bounces around a bit, and so we kind of, we work quite a lot with the local school. I have two kids there, so we set up this little football meetup, that was for a local football game that happens once a year. Um, Through that, we got that going. It actually, like, so many kids were turning up, and then we kind of just like, well, let's just turn up and play. And then we were like, well, we need public liability and stuff for that,
Yep.
and all that kind of, the frustrations, but it's necessary. So we went down the pipe play route, which I know you kind of know quite a bit about. So one of our main focuses now is to bring pipe play to 5 villages in our area. So kind of that's our new little driver to go. We're going to come into 5 different villages in the Ribble Valley and
Hmm.
kind of work with the community. So it won't be me just going, right, we're setting up a pipe play. This one's kind of laying the law down. It's going to be, right, who's going to be that community champion? Who's going to really drive it? Who are going to be the player leads? Who's going to be involved? Where are we going to have it? Really working kind of on that basis of making it right for that village, but really driving that, because in essence it gives 3 years of sustainability of
Hmm.
play, or of activity, which again is that kind of whole village approach, to hopefully be that after 3 years each village will love that so much that they will just,
Yep.
it'll belong to them, and they'll want to take it on and make it whatever they want to make it. So that's the, I suppose that's the main driver in the active villages stuff, and then working on each specific need in a village to see what we can add around that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, you're right. I love Park Play. I think that they have a really good message, and I think they tap into so many things with that sort of non-competitive, multi-generational play. A lot of the benefits that you were saying about rounders, about not really needing special equipment, not needing to look a certain way, not needing to be a certain level of fitness, et cetera. They just do such a great job with that, and I'm always really impressed with just how many boxes it ticks. I remember when I first spoke to Rick and I was learning about park play. I'm like, this is exactly what people need. It's definitely just a force for good. How sustainability is such an important thing, and it's
Yeah,
one of the things that we always struggle. Well, not struggle. It's one of the things we always think about as well, because, we always hear these stories about having this really impressive champion coming through or getting a certain amount of funding and then having it dry up. And I think you've sort of hit on the same solution I do, which is you have to get the community involved and they have to feel like it's something of theirs, something they want to keep on going. It's one of the reasons why in Wild Strong we try to do all the peer coaching,
well,
and we try to do the bi-directional learning and everything because we really want every member of the community to feel like if they wanted to, they could step up and run a class. And obviously, what you said about liability is tricky as well. That's going to be one of the biggest barriers, I think, to getting normal people to start this. Just people if they don't know anything else, how can I begin? And then one of the first questions is, well, what happens if someone gets hurt? I guess
well,
I guess one of the last questions I want to ask you, it's kind of a two-parter. It's connected to what I was just saying is I'd like to know a little bit more about how you guys identify the champions and communicate and how you sort of communicated with the community to identify play leaders and things like that to get the structure going. And the second part of it is if there are people who aren't in Ribble Valley, just sort of normal people listening to this podcast, how can they start something? How can they get some kind of active community going, even if they feel like they're not an expert or anything like that? So two-parter. First, how do you identify the champions and the play leaders, and how do you communicate to everybody? And then second one, if you're not part of this network, what can you do?
so do you know what? They're probably both similar-ish answers.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes down to so keep keeping it small. So in terms of like kind of in terms of how we went and found like the player leaders and how we've kind of built up and gone with this, it's kind of almost don't have a real kind of strong willed mindset on what's going to happen because it
Yep.
needs to change and be adaptable constantly. And finding those players, it's literally just talking to people, keeping it small and talking to people. So it's when I say like the active village, it's almost like I think this could be passed into bigger urban areas
Yep.
with this idea that like village it down. Because
Village it down. I like that.
yeah, it's a good phrase, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's more belonging and more that feeling of belonging and connecting, and all those really important things come when you're a small, unified, or as unified as anybody can be, kind of community. Um, so and that is through that. Once you get that, you can go and chat to people, and have these little one-to-one conversations or tiny little group conversations. It sounds ridiculous because it sounds like I do all this work and then I go and present, and like I feel like almost, why am I presenting this stuff? Because it's obvious. I'm just telling people to go and have little conversations with people, and it doesn't have to be a big organized talk even if a village hall or anything like that. It's just
Hmm.
go for a little wander, chat to people, and it's like really listen to what they're saying. And then for me, because I was in the role, I could listen, and I could go back and I could just write them down, and I was just getting these like little things. I was like, well, that person said they would be interested in doing this, or they had this idea, and it's like, well, I'll go back and I'll ask them if they're interested now. And I almost finding the player leaders was that it was just little chats with people, and people going, I'd be interested in that, or or I know someone would be interested. So it's great because I mean, in Dunstable Bridge we have 4. I think there could even be more, and I'd love for people to keep coming and and find that. And I suppose going into other villages a little bit different, but finding the community champions is going in and first of all you've got to find maybe organisations or know people through other people in the area to go
Hmm.
and say, listen, can I have a chat with you? And then almost, yeah, just have a chat, pick the brains. Who's the sporty person? Who's the active person?
Yep.
Who's the real community like? Even if they're not sporty or active, who's the one that like knows everybody and talks to everybody? I think one of the great things that we got taught recently in the community thing is find the people, the 3%ers. So they're the people that know everybody.
Yep.
So they might not be the flashiest person, the biggest person, the loudest person, but they're the person that's connected to loads of different people.
Yep.
And just find those people and take your time with that. And it might be a different person to the one you first thought,
Yep.
but go with that. And then sometimes it's just the one that steps forward and goes, I really want there to be something in this community for, and it might be like, the child, the nephew, their husband, the parents. It's that person who really can see that, they've thought about it. It's really on the front of their mind that they want to have something, and yeah, like, and that goes for it in any other community. If you want to start something, just get talking to people.
Get talking.
Yeah,
Yep.
get talking. And it might be, even if you wanted to kickstart it in a more modern way we have a little kind of local Facebook group that I set up, which is like like you have your community groups,
Yep.
like whatever, Dunsop Bridge chat. We have the Active Order page.
Hmm.
So it's got everything that's going on active there. So that also feeds into other conversations and people knowing. But honestly, yeah, just go out. If you've got an idea in your village to be active, go out and chat to somebody else about it. Just bounce the idea off them, see if they're interested, and just keep doing that or ask them questions. Have you got any ideas? And really just, start to build that up. And then honestly, go for it. Because
Go for it. Yep.
I was thinking this, so many people, especially in the public sector, which is funny because when you mentioned about me going into like the public sector work, I was like, oh, God, I was like, I didn't even realize that I was in the public sector. I was like, I am. I really am.
Yeah.
Like, you go into it, and I feel that so many people go into it with such passion, don't they?
Yes.
And then, 10 years goes by, and that passion's been like squashed by maybe the person that had a passion 10 years on and theirs got
Yes.
squashed. And it's like, so if there's anybody who comes to you with a passion, try and remember the passion that you had when you first started,
Yep.
because now there's two of you. And if there's two of you, there's probably more. And there's this idea that I think people, they lose the passion and they feel that's how life should be now because they lost it and there's nobody else, just get squashed. And it's like, no, if you just kind of remember it and go with the new person that's got that passion, get on with them. And it's like, that's how we can start to change this route of kind of being more active again as a norm.
That's great. And also just bang on an hour. So I had some follow-up questions, but I thought that's such a good place to end that I think I'll just stop the recording there, and then we can do another chat in the future because I think that's just a really great place to tidy it up.
Real.
It's a daily exercise. It's a daily exercise. It's a daily exercise.
So that was my talk with Matt Donnelly of Bowland Fitness, also of Together an Active Future, the Active Village lead, who's done lots of interesting things, including bringing park play into a small community. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you have any questions, send us a message. If you'd like to get in touch with Matt, we can forward your information his way. If you want any information about park play, please let us know as well. And I'll go ahead and put some relevant links into the show notes. Take care.